Tapscott.
And I'm Alex Tapscott.
And this is What's on Tap. Alex, this week we're very fortunate to have a guest. And the topic is blockchain in Africa.
That's right.
A huge topic. Our guest is our very good friend and close collaborator, Ian Putter, who's the head of the center, a blockchain center of excellence of Standard Bank, largest bank in Africa. And Ian is someone who's deeply knowledgeable. He's got a great passion for solving problems in Africa. And he's been a blockchain guy for a long time. So, Ian, we're just delighted to have you here today. And I'll also mention that Ian will be heading up our efforts to create the BRI in Africa. And this is being done in partnership with Standard Bank. So we're so excited to have this very powerful and important organization helping us roll out not just blockchain, but the work of the BRI and all the intellectual property and services of the BRI to the African population. Alex, do you want to set this up for us here about just some challenges in Africa? And then maybe you can start asking Ian a couple of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So Africa as a continent is the youngest and fastest growing continent on planet Earth. And it's one that has a very bright future. It's one that has a young and dynamic population, increasingly well-versed and very used to using technology. And it's seeing an explosion in growth of crypto asset, blockchain-related activity. Many countries in Africa, such as Nigeria, are already global leaders in that respect, which is quite fascinating. But there are also many challenges as well. There's still a vast part of the population which is unbanked. Many people who own property have a title that would be difficult to defend if push came to shove, thanks to unreliable record keeping. Remittance fees between African countries and also between African countries and the rest of the world are still very high. By some estimates, the World Bank thinks it's around 9 to 10%. And many people rely on currencies which don't hold their value because of the practices of central banks in many small countries. And of course, corruption is still a problem in many parts of the continent. Now, it's a huge continent with many very different kinds of countries. So we don't want to oversimplify things. But we do see, obviously, a number of pretty exciting kinds of blockchain solutions. Going to crypto native banking in the same way that people skip landlines and went straight to cell phones, they could skip a lot of traditional kinds of financial services and go straight to a form of digital banking. And that's an area that Standard Bank is a leader in. Using stable coins as a medium of exchange, looking to put land titles and registries on blockchains to give them enforceability and immutability, and giving users more choices on how to store value using these new digital tools as well. And let's also not forget that we could be using blockchains as a potential way to basically have an audit trail that everyone can trust to hold those in power to account, reduce corruption, and improve the efficiency and metabolism of the financial industry. So it's pretty exciting, obviously. The BRI is really delighted, I think, to be partnering with Standard Bank in this area and to have Ian as our champion and ally in Africa. So Ian, that sort of sets the scene for us, but why don't you tell us why you think it's so important to bring blockchain and the Blockchain Research Institute into Africa?
Thanks, Alex and Don, for including me in your talk today. Firstly, it's a great opportunity. And I think for Africa, blockchain represents a great opportunity. I think from an educational perspective, it's vital to train people at different levels to enable the implementation of blockchain. But a critical thing that you mentioned is that a large part of the African population in all the countries is unbanked and underbanked. And remittances is big in Africa, and that's costly. To transfer money cross-border in Africa is expensive, and that excludes a lot of small and medium enterprises and individuals that, if they have access to funding and banking services, could facilitate the growth of Africa. In short.
Well, it's very exciting. So this is something that I think a lot of banks are starting to pay attention to, which is what does this mean for legacy financial institutions? Now, I think Standard Bank is in a really unique position in its market because it is the dominant or the largest bank, but not only in South Africa, across the continent. And a lot of these solutions that we talk about, I think require, if not a global perspective, at least a sort of cross-border perspective, right, in order to reach their potential. So what are some specific areas that Standard Bank is looking at in the blockchain space today?
So we are looking at streamlining cross-border payments, also creating interbank networks to bypass the existing rails to facilitate almost zero-cost payments between the different countries and from Africa to other continents as well. We're also looking at creating operational efficiencies. If you think about smart contracts, if you look at back office operations, how expensive it is to run banking operations, blockchain can make a huge difference here and democratize financial services. Mm-hmm. We're also looking at a bond exchange. So bonds are very interesting instruments. It can facilitate, it can generate lots of funding. And if you put it on a decentralized exchange, you have access to a wide ecosystem. It can go beyond Africa to facilitate funding in Africa for medical services, as well as providing food to people that don't normally have access. In a lot of African countries where transport systems are not developed enough to facilitate that. And as you highlight these shortages with blockchain, people start picking up on these limitations and start transportation businesses to facilitate the connection of people to ports and to enable them to receive medical equipment and anything that's required or necessary that people don't have access to today.
Interesting. Yeah, that sounds like you're being inspired in part by some of the things that are happening in the DeFi space, the decentralized finance space. You know, the idea of making something like a bond that could go towards solving a problem available for purchase to investors anywhere in the world, and having that, you know, financial instrument be a smart contract. And that's basically what all assets are. In fact, they're sort of contracts. Is quite powerful. How do you, you know, I know there's a lot to unspool here, but how do you put that into practice exactly? Do you see Standard Bank as being, you know, a participant in a decentralized exchange for those kinds of assets, or as someone who might even originate that kind of a project? And who would your partners be in building something like that, do you think?
So we partnering with next generation blockchains, we are not focused on a specific solution, but we are also looking to partner with banks that we are in discussions with to help us to take this forward, as well as some of the blockchain research organizations in Africa to make it a collaborative effort. But we are the originator at this stage of this decentralized exchange with partnerships helping us to establish that. But also globally, there are blockchain experts that's supporting the bank. So it's great partnerships that's helping us to get this off the ground fairly quickly.
Well, and I know that the Blockchain Research Institute sees itself as a key ally, especially as you point out on the education front. You know, it's definitely there's definitely a learning curve here for people who are used to the way that banks and financial intermediaries normally function when trying to explain to them how you might implement these kinds of solutions. So we're obviously very proud to be involved with this and hope to help support your efforts in this area. Don, it looked like you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah. You said some things that are kind of extraordinary coming from a banker, Ian, that you want to bypass the existing rails using blockchain to reduce fees cross-border and elsewise for customers to almost zero. That sounds like a revolutionary speaking, not a banker. Where's that coming from? And tell us a bit about the philosophy of Standard Bank and how it views improving the state of the quality of life, standard of living in people in Africa.
Standard Bank's vision, firstly, Standard Bank sees Africa as its home. We are represented in a lot of the African countries, and we want to drive Africa's growth. And the only way that you'll drive Africa's growth is by enabling small, medium enterprises and small businesses to create employment. And in turn, to facilitate that, Don, you've got to give people access to funding and banking services and the ability to do cross-border payments. Imagine if you're running a small enterprise in one of the countries and you can't import something from another country and you can't export because you don't have the capability, firstly, to manage the exposures. Firstly, you don't have access. And by providing this, we believe that this distributed ledger technology can facilitate this, provide a transparent ledger that facilitates peer-to-peer transactions, where people can trust the underlying transactions without incurring large costs to bring this trust. And that there is still a lot of work to facilitate that. But what we've also seen in Africa, there's 5 countries at the moment that's looking at central bank digital currencies. Even the governments are seeing blockchain as a means to facilitate banking the unbanked and underbanked, and to bring growth to their economies by democratizing these services. And that's not only true for banking services, that's also commoditizing, tokenizing agricultural products.
How so? Tell us about that.
There is initiatives. I don't know if you know about the free trade agreement in Africa. We're also busy on some solutions there to facilitate cross-border trade across Africa to drive growth. And we are busy there with to commoditize some of the agricultural products to facilitate seamless administration, tracking in a transparent way between the different countries to speed up the underlying processes that typically hamper and prevent these transactions to seamlessly happen between different countries. And if you can connect that with the settlement capabilities, seamless settlements, utilizing stablecoins, CBDCs, or even crypto, you can create very, very efficient cross-border trade capabilities and opportunity.
Is this a vision, or have you started doing stuff? Yeah,
we've started working with countries already to establish that cross-border trade capabilities. We've started, as you know, with the cross-border payments capabilities. We are working on agricultural opportunities as well with a few participants in South Africa. And then we're also working on accounts payable and receivable capabilities. If you think about fees and payments and licenses that needs to be paid, we're busy putting that on blockchain to facilitate peer-to-peer, almost to create a new ledger where people don't have to maintain separate ledgers to track and trace the payments and the rendering of services on a blockchain. So all these things that I'm talking about is in progress, and we've got 5 blockchains that's in production at the moment.
You know, this is an extraordinary thing. And one of the reasons the Standard Bank is so interesting, and as you know, I've got to know the company and the executive team and the board well, as has Alex, but it's not just sort of the blockchain group buried away, trying to do its little pilots without support from the rest of the company. There's a very broad appreciation right to the top, and then throughout the management team about what is the technology, about the opportunity here. There's a great passion. It compares with the very best of any company that I've seen in the world, really, in terms of that kind of comprehension and sensing of the opportunity. Um, how did that happen? I'm sure it took a while, but any advice for people trying to create this kind of understanding and culture around this topic?
I think the bank's got a very open culture, and that's facilitated. You met the board and you met the senior management of Standard Bank. Very open-minded, and they made sure from the start that they understand the technology. And even the Standard Bank board, if you look at all the different countries, we've trained every single country's board on blockchain. And then in the bank, there is also, everybody learns at all levels. And I don't think we've got a layer that doesn't follow the guidance of our board to follow and look at emerging technologies. I think 5 years ago, we started looking at blockchain. And because we've got such an open, innovative, I'm going to call it an innovative culture, experimentation is not frowned upon, and failure is not a bad thing. And learning and experimentation is something that we do as a bank. And I think that's helping us a lot. And having that support at that level in the organization facilitates experimentation. And when you prove that something can work, the evidence is there. When we worked on blockchain, it's also a technology where innovation, quick experimentation is also luckily possible with. So you can prove ideas and innovate very quickly.
Ian, can you talk a little bit about the kind of collaboration that's required with other industry participants and even with governments, specifically SARB, or I guess it's SARB, the South African Reserve Bank, which is your central bank. We've actually had some conversations with the folks over there, and I mean, central banks are central banks, but they've shown an openness certainly to all of this stuff. And I think that maybe that's in part because of your advocacy with them. So I'd like to just understand that a bit better, because, I think that there's a lot industry can do, but it's always helpful if, you've got the government on side as well, right? So that's an important topic, I think.
Now, my advice, we've also got a fairly open central bank, and they provide sandboxes for us to experiment. But my advice to everyone is from the very start to work closely with your regulator. We're also working closely with our regulators across Africa, and to take the regulator to work, collaborate with them, to take them on this journey with you from the start. Because then they can see that the transparent nature of this technology facilitates regulation. And it's not that Bitcoin is not blockchain. A lot of central banks are concerned about cryptocurrency, but I think in Africa, it's also seen as a great opportunity to facilitate payments. And by working closely with the central banks, you create a relationship and you experiment with them. I think blockchain is not something like legacy technology where you go and buy something and you plug it in and you play. This is something that you build with lots of participants. Right. And the more you collaborate and the wider you collaborate, that's why we also came to the BRI 2 years ago. It's the only way to learn from others. And this is, for me, it's amazing because people are very willing to share and everybody contributes. The bigger your network becomes, the more you realize. And the other point that I want to raise is you're a novice every single day. You must come to work. When you work on this as a novice, you don't know. If you think you know, you don't know. There is just so many people, unbelievable people across the world that can show you what to do. You don't have to reinvent the wheel yet.
That's a great line. Come to work every day as a novice. I feel like that every day, really, whether I want to or not, honestly. The pace of change is just so extraordinary. We've talked about all these other opportunities in Africa too. It's a very sort of uneven, I would say, combined and uneven thing. Sometimes things take off and sometimes things move more slowly. And as you said, with a traditional IT, you build it and then you roll it out and bada bada bing, there you go. Whereas with this stuff, you want to change the entire banking system, you want to change something like land titles or like remittances or these like supply chains. I mean, these are things that require a vast ecosystem of companies to be able to work together. And for a lot of these businesses and industries, there are structures and governments and regulations and old IT locking us into old ways. So I think that clearly this is going to take a while. And I wanted to ask you about land titles, because that was one that's we wrote about this, I guess, what, 5-6 years ago now, Alex, and blockchain revolution. And we pointed out that 70% of the land titles in the world were not enforceable. And this, of course, is a big problem in Africa. Then it turns out that the big challenge is not to get the technology together to do this. It's to try and get valid land titles in the first place. Is this a topic that you're thinking about?
We do think about it a lot. And we had an African blockchain week just before COVID. And some of the countries, I'm going to mention Kenya specifically, was very interested in that registry. Mm-hmm. And not saying that all the others are not interested. There's many African countries that's very interested in this land registry solution, and we also have it as one of the use cases that we want to look at across Africa. But something that's vital for that to work is self-sovereign identity, digital identity, and what we've realized. We are working on a self-sovereign identity solution in partnership with big companies and blockchain. I don't know what to call, not service providers, but protocols, basically, to help us to put that together fairly quickly from a retail perspective and from a wholesale perspective. So I think what's essential for a land registry is to get your identity right. That's something that typically is linked to the underlying land registry. If you know what, you've got to know Ian Butter owns this property. You connect the identity of the tokenized property to the individual. And we're busy working on self-sovereign identity to facilitate all the blockchains that we're working on. But that answered your question.
Well, those two are great ones. And identity, I mean, I think, to Alex's point about leapfrogging other countries, this is a situation in Africa where the installed base, if you like, of large digital conglomerates capturing everybody's data and using it to their disadvantage, monetizing it for themselves, undermining the privacy of individuals, putting data on unsecure services and places so that we as users have to pick up all the pieces, preventing data from being aggregated together in, like, say, a pandemic for social purposes. This is not as mature in Africa, which is a real advantage. So it never occurred to me, but maybe Africa could be the continent that leapfrogs on this question of creating a self-sovereign identity that's owned by citizens, where each of us gets to recapture the digital us and manage our identities responsibly for ourselves. Great talk. So, Ian, you mentioned Kenya. What are you rolling the BRI out across all of Africa? Could you talk about your plans? I think you have a subset of countries that are kind of the key targets.
Yeah, so we are going to roll it out across the African continent, but we started with Nigeria, Kenya, Uganda, Ghana, and South Africa. We are registering the BRI Africa patent across Africa. So as the patents are registered, we're rolling it out to those countries. It's a more prudent approach. You can't roll out BRI Africa if you haven't patented the name. And there is already lots of interest. I mean, as I said to you, we've already met with potential members, and people are very excited about the opportunity to create research with BRI and also the educational component behind this. And the fact that they can get access to research that you guys have done is a very big driving force. There's really lots of interest, and I'm very excited about the opportunity here. People are calling me. I'm focusing a lot of my day job on BRI. I'm actually working for BRI at this stage, and Standard Bank, to combine and to make sure that this works. And then there's regulators that we're talking to, universities, audit firms. I think if we can combine all that, we can build ultimately together a trusted ecosystem platform across Africa for bonds, derivatives, identity, agriculture. You know that blockchain applies to all these fields. And I think food security and all those things can become a part of this. There is already interest to do research projects with BRI. So I'm going to start listing those that we can work together.
Well, I'll say on our side that we are so excited to be working with you. And I think that, for Standard Bank, of course, it's a company that's a commercial organization, as are we. But I think for both of us, this is not fundamentally a, commercial opportunity. Yeah. It's an opportunity to have a real impact on the world. And ultimately, that helps everybody. I mean, I remember we said in Blockchain Revolution that around this topic that the economy works best when it works for everyone. And that means lowering barriers to participation. And the statement was, it means creating platforms for distributed capitalism, not just redistributed capitalism.
Exactly.
So rather than we get all the wealth that exists, that's captured at the top and spread it out, well, there's a role for that. Why don't we try and make the economy more democratic in the first place, so that the creators of value are fairly compensated, so that we generate all kinds of new businesses, so that people have a valid title to their lands, that everybody gets to participate in the banking system and in the economy, and that this is just such an extraordinary idea. I know, Ian, also that you're that the situation in South Africa with the Delta variant is horrific, and you're being very brave and courageous, soldiering ahead under these terrible conditions for everyone's interest. Alex and I are supposed to be in South Africa in the spring, and obviously we weren't able to make that trip. But Ian, I can't wait for us to get down there and to travel around with you to these different countries, and to really give a big jump start to this kind of activity throughout the region. Alex, any other thoughts from you?
No, other than, this is, I won't say the start of a beautiful friendship, because we've been at it for a couple of years now, but still feels like we're at the beginning of something really important. And, the BRI is delighted to be partnered with Standard Bank on this initiative. And we see an opportunity to create some really meaningful, positive change in the world. So onward and upward.
Ian, I'll give you the last words. Any thoughts about what is the opportunity here?
Hold on. I think, as you said, as soon as the borders open, we will have to get you and Alex over here. The opportunity for us is to get access to all the knowledge, to all the research, and I think it can create a lot of opportunities that can be implemented extremely quickly. If I look at what I've learned out of the BRI research, I think by exposing lots of African people to that knowledge and research, it's going to help us to grow very, very quickly.
Terrific. Well, a big part of the gap between the potential of this technology and the reality is just know-how. And as you know, we've done over 100 projects that are all know-how. Here are the opportunities. Here are the kinds of challenges you're going to face. Here's how to get from here to there. So, and from our point of view, we do have a commitment to make this broadly available to millions and millions of people across the continent. I guess that's it for What's on Tap this week. We will be hosting a webinar next Wednesday, July 21st at 1 p.m. ET, and it's about blockchain, AI, and the battlefield of things. So this is this term that we've been using called the trivergence, the convergence of blockchain, AI, and the Internet of Things. And trivergence is coming together around data. It's enabled often by the cloud and 5G and other technologies for communication. So that should be a great session. And also, just a reminder, there are 2 weeks left to get your submissions in for the Enterprise Blockchain Awards. And you can do that at blockchainrevolutionglobal.com. And the award ceremony will be November 15th, black tie ceremony in Toronto and broadcast around the world. Ian, thanks again so much. And Alex, we'll see you next week for
Thanks.
What's on Tap.
Great to see you,
Thank
Ian.
you very much.
Yeah, thanks for
Great to
joining
see
us.
you guys.
Okay, bye.
It's a big pleasure. Thank you. Bye.